Hi, it's Paul Banis, the GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude, where at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com here with my weekly conversations with fathers and talking about modern fatherhood. And I've got a guest today who's also a coach like I am, but more specializing on finding purpose and fulfillment in the second half of your life. So welcome, Adam Landrum.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really liked your background. Well, both of us have come from an agency background, so we have that. But just also taking a hard look at what the whole idea of purpose and meaning is, and putting forward that whole idea of what people regret at the end of their lives. I've heard that study, or that thing that people say over and over, and I don't know if it actually is a study. Maybe but that's the most common thing men say on their deathbed is, "I wish I'd spent more time with my family." Do you think that's like a truism, or have you ever heard of a study that actually says that?
Yeah, I heard the source of it that I understand. It was a nurse in New Zealand a hospice nurse. And so she was asking her clients what their biggest regret was. And I think the number one regret they said is actually, I didn't live a life true to myself.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, I certainly have, experienced that of like, gosh, I wish I would have done things differently. And then number two was I would have spent more time with my family. So whether it was one or two, and if that was the same nurse who took that study, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I heard that source from.
But both of those perspectives almost seem like I spent too much time at work, and the work, it was
Yeah,
work rather than my life's purpose, or my work toward my purpose.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, at the end of the day, I didn't do the stuff that was important. I didn't do the stuff that mattered.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's what I'm passionate about, is figuring out what matters, how we people figure that out, and,
Yeah.
and then actually do it.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit before we got started about how what a crisis men are in during these formative years, because you have, I don't know what the average age now is for men getting married, like 29, I think is 29. I think it's so you're having
That sounds
kids.
right.
You're kind of like in the center of fatherhood, right in the middle of your classic midlife crisis years, and you're pulled in the direction of the family as well as at work. And at the same time, most men go through a crisis of what was it all for? I learned people told me all these things about what it was supposed to be, and it's not like that. And I'm not making enough money to be as rich as my neighbors or as my brother, and all these existential questions like that usually come back to what is the meaning, rather than I mean, people search for, like, I want to have a sports car and all that stuff. Like, I don't have enough, but it's usually that's a replacement for this whole idea of meaning and satisfaction and purpose and all these things. Why do you think,
Yeah.
you've got the kids in front of you, and that should be meaning enough for a lot of people, right? I mean, that's like one of the most important things that we do. We are put on this planet with whatever belief system you have. We're built to, like, reproduce and keep populating the planet. Why do you think it's not enough just to have, make good humans and revel in that special opportunity?
Yeah. Well, I guess my experience was, my wife and I have four kids.
Yeah.
They're currently 23, 21, 19, 17, boy, girl, boy, girl. Like to keep it even. Um, it, you know, it, uh, Besides our marriage, we believe put the marriage first, put the kids second. I think there are a lot of people out there who think that the kids are the priority. I think technically, I think that's, or candidly, I think that's a mistake. But our kids were, as important as our marriage was, our kids were certainly a priority as well, right? And so we were pretty busy focused on the kids and sort of heads down. And so I think a little bit to your point is it was when the kids started getting older, they're teenagers, they have friends, they're doing their own thing. You start sort of like, we start like looking around like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
what we are so focused on isn't, we're not as needed as much. And so I don't know, you start getting some free time, you start getting some, maybe you're starting to make a little bit more money now because you're further in your career. So you have we had more margin, both time and money. And we're human, we don't like vacuums, like we're right, we want to fill it with something, and we've got nothing to we have nothing to fill it with now.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of the uh, struggle that people face. And I also, it'd be interesting to see what you think about this, Paul, is that I've been thinking about this idea of like, even as a little kid, we're given a lot of adventures to go on, right? We learn how to walk, we learn how to ride a bike and make friends, and learn how to get on the sports team and get through high school, and then pick, if to the quote unquote traditional model, we pick our the college that we're going to go to, and then our major, and then we get married and we get our first house and we get our first job, and so like we're just giving all of these adventures to
Yeah.
figure out.
Yeah. Where it's new. It's the
Man,
first day we've ever seen this. Yeah. Whatever it is. Yeah.
yeah. And so you get to midlife and adventures aren't coming at you anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And now you have to make your own adventure. Like you're the source of the momentum and the inertia to get going. And where it used to be, we just sat back and we just dealt with the adventures as they came. So I don't know. What do you think about that theory of
No, I think that's really,
yeah.
it's, I think I told you before we started, I run a group of men over 55 and finding meaning. And a lot of that is like getting off the couch and not letting the old man in, just is keep on doing those things. But women often accuse us men, in middle age and beyond. My wife mentioned this just this morning. She said she wanted me to do something tonight and I wasn't too into it. She said, all my girlfriends, we all complain that our husbands just sit on the couch, in the evening. And I'm like, that's not really true in our case, but I take your point is that they quite often complain that a lot of us don't, despite all the advertising and everything, we're not out, windsurfing and boating and playing basketball. Oh, all the things that you got to get the idea from advertising that men just are just wildly adventuresome, when they have the time. Is that true? Do you think that there's this like need for the adventure, but then also a lot of complacency in men as we kind of get to this, late 40s, early 50s, where you kind of get a little tired and you're maybe a little bit burnt out, and sometimes the best idea for fun on a Friday night is just sitting at home and watching some movie.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, we do have less energy. I think the adventure starts looking different,
Yeah.
different than it did. I just call it the young man's game, and my body is I'm 51 years old, so my body is starting to tell me you can't do some of the things that you used to do, and so I think we have to adjust and find the appropriate level of adventure. But I am a firm believer. I don't know the book Wild at Heart, if you're familiar with John Eldridge. It's about 20 years ago probably, but yeah, it is. I just believe that every man should know his purpose, have a vision, and be on a mission. Should be on like we're made for adventure, and I think it's a big mistake to stop it. And when you get complacent, sort of like that. When people retire and they have no purpose, they have nothing to do. They have a heart attack and die, right? So,
Right.
So kids, I mean, huge purpose to what we're doing. And then when when we're empty nest or when they get that teenage, man, a big part of our adventure is coming to an end, and we got to reboot. We got to find something else.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a warning, it's a warning to dads who are just getting started that is coming into your future, and you need to be kind of aware of it. You mentioned before we get started too that like somebody who's got kids like 3 and 5, they're like they haven't really experienced the whole arc of parenthood from those early days where the kids cling on you and love everything you say to them pulling away and it becoming a lot more questionable what the relationship is and how much you're getting back from it and all that you put in, and it gets very very confusing. Do you think that adds to that whole feeling of what the purpose, or maybe it pulls away from the idea that the kids were the purpose because they need to push you away, but it takes away, I mean, it's emptying your cup of that purpose driven feeling you have for, good 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I'm laughing at a couple things in my head here. How old are your kids, Paul?
Mine are now 21 and 25.
Okay, all right, so we're similar in that. So yeah, so I don't know if you experienced this. I did, but at some point, we become the dumbest men on earth in our kids' eyes, right? Our
Yeah.
kids know everything.
Right.
We're so dumb. They don't want to be seen with you. If you used to give them a kiss on the cheek, they don't want,
Yeah.
don't do that anymore, dad. So you sort of, you start to get pushed away. And yeah, like I experienced that with my sons earlier. My daughter's a little bit later in their teens. And the good news is they come back around. They
Yeah.
come back around. So I think that can be, if a younger father isn't aware of that, that can be a little startling. That can be a little shocking. Of like, I used to be the man to my kids, and
Yeah.
now now they don't want me.
Yeah.
So that could be disorienting too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if your whole purpose is around them. I know I stayed at home with our second born, so I was the dad. I'm older than my wife, and I was in a position in my career where I wanted to take if I wanted at least to take a break from it. But I
Yeah.
realized really very early on as they were, in first of all, not in preschool and then in preschool and then in kindergarten and, then full days at school, somewhere very early on, you have to find another thing that takes, that you are focused on. And some people fall into the trap where they put 100% of their being into parenting, and then when that is gone, they don't have a sense of self other than that role. And it's even worse if the kid is then, pushed them away for whatever evolutionary reasons. And
Yeah.
they have to find that really fast on the fly at age 45 or 50. So
Yeah.
do you talk with a lot of younger men who are trying to find the purpose? I mean, who are smart enough to try to find that purpose earlier on in this trajectory, or are you usually talking to men who are kind of more in a crisis and need to respond to a feeling of emptiness?
Yeah. There's a thing called the change formula that basically says you're not going to change unless you have enough vision or discomfort.
Yeah,
And usually the discomfort is the driver. So if you don't have the pain, you're not going to, you're
right.
typically not going to change. So to answer your question, is probably more people who are feeling the pain. I don't know if I'd say they're full-fledged midlife crisis, but like the main question, Paul, that I hear is there's got to be more to this. These men are successful.
Yeah.
They're by anyone's right. They have a great family, beautiful wife, successful, and they feel empty, right? And they're still saying, I call it the midlife malaise. Like it's just like I shouldn't be dissatisfied, but I am. So that's probably the main. But I recently coached a guy. He is 40, and he's sort of getting ahead of it. And he has younger kids, and he's just like, man, I need to find this purpose thing because I can't keep doing what I've been doing. And a lot of what I do, it's purpose and where purpose and business intersect. So it's
Hmm.
either career or I'm going to start a business, and so they're looking to figure out how to make a pivot.
Yeah. And you work with a lot of solopreneurs. And are those solopreneurs who are deciding to be a solopreneur so that they can find more meaning, or they're already a solopreneur and then trying to figure out a balance between? their new avocation and their family?
Yeah. No, it's more of, hey, I've been in the corporate world. I've always wanted to have my own business, and man, I'm going to go for it. Or and I don't know how. So that, they'll come to me because I was an agency owner for 22 years, and I do the purpose thing. So helping them, giving them the confidence to be like, I've always wanted to start this thing, Adam. Help me figure out my purpose and help me how to run a business.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's just an exciting thing. I'm a sucker for entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurs, and that's one of the greatest adventures in life is to go do your own thing.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting the way you put it that they come to you to help find their purpose and their new thing. It almost sounds as if they're trying to solve, kill two birds with one stone, like help me find that purpose and start a business around that purpose once we find it. Is it like that,
Yeah.
or they already kind
Well,
of have an idea what they're like they've already got the idea and then they're trying to say, well, how would that backtrack to a purpose?
yeah. Well, let's talk about that because I think that's interesting. Is you know, uh, purpose is why you exist. It's what you're great at, right? And one of the best ways to apply your purpose is to do it in work,
Hmm.
because we're at work, or we're
Yeah. Yeah.
working more than we are at home, right? And so, like, man, if you could do your purpose and get paid for it, like, jackpot. So I say the correct term for that is vocation. And a vocation basically is a job with a calling. Like, you can't not do your vocation. If you have a calling, you are going to be miserable if you don't do it. So vocation is just doing a job with purpose. So, and I believe everybody really knows what their purpose is. We
Oh
we
yeah.
make it, yeah. I think we make it complicated. We make it way too complicated. And if I simply ask you, well, what are you best at? Like, what do what are you better than most people? And you tell me, I'm like, I think therein lies your purpose. It may not be perfectly wordsmith. Like, it might even take you a couple years to start chipping away and uncovering it, but it's there. Like, purpose is to be discovered. You don't. It's sort of like, well, we could get into brand and stuff like that, but I always say branding is discovering who you are as an organization or a company. We don't make it up, and the same thing is with purpose. Well, we don't make up what purpose is. It's You just have to uncover it. So
Yeah, well, that is an interesting debate because I remember as a young man, like trying to figure out what I was going to do at all, and end up going to business school. Of just being really very jealous of people who were wanted to be an actor or writer or things that were really to me completely impractical solutions. They knew they would struggle for decades and decades if they ever were get any success whatsoever. But I was almost envious of the fact that they knew they were so driven by that thing. And I was lucky. Like in business school, I found advertising and got really turned on by that, and that kind of became my purpose for 25 years. But um, I don't know if I think that it's as easy. Well, maybe we're in agreement that it exists there. It's latent. It's somewhere inside you. It's not always easy to identify it. So don't feel bad,
yes,
people, if like you're 40 and you're thinking about this, because that's where people like Adam come in handy to work with you to figure it out.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, I didn't say it was easy. I didn't. I don't think I did. Maybe I did, but I didn't say it's easy. But it is there to be uncovered. So
Yeah.
yeah, you just said that. But you found, like, in marketing, I would say, I wouldn't say marketing was probably your purpose, but I would say that you found conviction in that work, and it was probably either through strategy or the creative process, or
Yeah.
there's something within that. And so look at what you're doing now, right? Um, this seems pretty purpose driven, what you're doing now.
Yeah, but and to your point though, I kind of backtracked into it. I say to my kids, so I did feel really strongly about the value of connected parenting, attachment parenting, positive discipline, all those great things around having really a loving family, not a fear-based family. And
Hmm.
I created this GreatDad.com and eventually ran Pregnancy Magazine, uh, more out of an idea that there was a business opportunity in supporting dads and supporting families. But you're right. That's turned into my kind of my why now, running a podcast and doing coaching with men to serve that whole thing. But it I think to what you were saying earlier, it does kind of back. Sometimes it's reverse engineered, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's nothing wrong with it. If you want to reverse engineer to get to the answer, one thing that I tell people, I don't think this is maybe necessarily true for everyone, but what was missing in your childhood often informs what your purpose. And I think it's if I could say God's way of saying, hey, look, this was missing from you, and so I want you to go put it back into the world.
yeah. Well, that's if it's like a guess your weight, guess your astrology sign kind of conversation, I'd be like spot on because I had a non-present father. I saw him twice a
Uh,
year and grew up with a single mom, and so the lack of fatherhood in my life is definitely a driver in wanting to make sure that more kids don't have that experience, or at least that fathers see the incredible value they have in that role. We
yeah, well,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's incredible, and yeah, not everyone has it, but it's interesting that is yours. Do you want to guess what was missing in my childhood?
I can't guess.
Purpose.
Purpose.
It was purpose. My
Oh, interesting.
father, yeah, divorced my mom when I was 3.
Uh-huh.
I was the youngest of 5. I had no meaning, no significance, nothing growing up. There's just like nothing. It was like a
No, like
purpose.
values orientation and
Yeah,
all.
nothing.
Yeah.
Is a purpose desert, and I'm
Wow.
like, man, I need purpose to live. And so I've just always have been passionate, about purpose. So
Wow.
anyway, so not everybody has that, but I've noticed, and I asked that question, and it is a very high correlation that what was missing from your childhood informs your purpose.
Wow, that is very interesting to have a purposeless childhood where you didn't feel like you. What age were you when you realized that was missing versus your friends and associates?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, it really came into being in college that from a spiritual standpoint that I got exposed to Christianity, and I didn't know I really had no interaction with Christianity growing up until college. So that was where it really hit. But I just remember thinking there must be more to life than this. Sort of like what people are asking in midlife.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was about 6, and my brain was hurting trying to figure out if there was a God or not, right? But I had no one to go talk to about that per se. So I just I don't know. I've just always been about, man, things should be meaningful. Like I just want to, if there's not a reason to do it, I don't want to do it. And by the way, the other thing is, I think like you, it made me want to be a great dad, right? Like I love my dad. My dad, it was too bad that they got divorced and that happened. But on the other hand, it's like I never I never want to do that to my kids, right? I never want to do that to another human being. That's awful. It's awful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's why I'm very passionate about fatherhood
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I'm a very big advocate of people staying together. I know sometimes there are situations where that is not at all possible,
Right.
but it is a huge responsibility to bring kids into the world and creating a family that lasts and is loving, and it never was meant to be simple. Yeah, so I think
Right.
having that be part of your purpose is a huge thing as well. We were going to talk a little bit about 3 things that you think of as regrets. I mean, my website was called GreatDad.com. It was available when I started this thing back in 2006. I never thought of myself as a great dad. It would never work for women. Women never would. The idea of greatmom.com, they would just be like
Yeah.
they throw up. They have so much pressure on themselves to be a great dad. But dads often get called great. What a great dad he is just because he bothered to show up for soccer practice or whatever. And I have tons of regrets. But you said you had 3 that you are willing to admit to.
Yeah. And yeah, on one hand, I do. I would say I think we were great parents, or we are great parents, but we're not perfect, and we definitely made some mistakes. So I'll roll through 3 of these, and these are a little bit advice to younger
Yeah, great.
dads, and it's stuff that you've probably heard, and I just wish I would have paid more attention. But
Mhm.
number one is And if my son listens to this, he'll love it. I'll probably send it to him. But I was we were too hard on our first. So again, we have four, and but in high school he got in trouble, and I came down really, really hard, very stern. Now he was really stubborn, and he knows that. But I can say that my second son, number three, did the same thing like 3 years later, and it was like, would you knock it off?
Right,
It was
right.
like,
Yeah,
just like,
typical.
stop, just
Yeah.
stop it. So I guess the flip of it is, my advice would be like, things when your kids don't meet your expectations, and do something stupid that they know they shouldn't be doing, and you definitely don't want them doing, like, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
like like take a breath. And I learned that later. But so that
Yeah,
was the first thing.
that's an interesting one because it gets into are you disappointed because it's a character flaw or it was a mistake? I mean, a kid who goes out and goes to a party and drinks at age 16, is that a part of of a pattern of lots and lots of discipline issues, or is it like, yeah, he did something great, he shouldn't have done. I think that's the thing we all kind of wrestle with, is how much discipline, how to modulate, and I'm with the firstborns, they're typically the ones that people are hardest
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
And then you mix in the at least for us, this was sort of our first like failure as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, big, like, we felt like failures. So
Yeah.
there, and oh, how do we look?
Right.
Like, how do we
Mhm.
look at, to our
Oh,
friends
yeah.
who find out, and
Oh,
stuff like that. But this would be a typical thing that a teenager would do. But there wasn't complete honesty. There was not remorse. There's not a lot of character things that we would hope to have seen. And I gave him the hammer. I came down really hard. And I think that he would say, yeah, that impacted him. And I always apologize for the father wounds that I'm creating and the future therapy that is sure to come. But yeah, so yeah, that was the first, or that's number one. Um, oh boy, now let me think about number two. I had number two, and it's leaving me. It's leaving me. Hmm. I need to. Can I flip
yeah.
over
No,
to
no
something
worries.
really quick?
Well, maybe while you're thinking that, or what to help spark that, is something else you learn that you would want to make sure that younger dads keep in mind. I mean, maybe it's back to some of the things we've already talked to about knowing that they're going to leave at some point, knowing that you have to develop your own purpose during that time period. Were there other things like that you learned that you'd want younger dads to know?
Well, I reminded myself. So coincidentally, that is what number two is. I would like dads to know this, and I learned this midway through our journey of parenting, that when they're younger, parenting is about authority, right?
Yep.
The 3-year-old running into the street, it is, no, stop right now, right? It is, this isn't a time to say, well, Johnny, do you want to run into the street? Like, if you want to, you can. No, you don't. No,
Yeah.
it's authority. But as they get older, especially as they get to teenage years, it becomes about influence. And
Mm,
so now you're saying, hey, look, you're 16, you're 17. We're raising you to make great choices, and I hope you make a good choice in this situation. But I'm not going to tell you no, not to do that, or I'm not going to, again, within reason. But so my regret, in that is I was too authoritative for too long. Now again, with the younger kids, whether it's intentional or not, it's more influence. Um, but I would have made it a faster shift to influence, and it's a continuum, right? It's a um, you know, it's not authority and then to influence, but it's some blend as they get older.
yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So and
I
then the
think
last.
that's a big lesson for all us all, is this constant modulation. And there's certainly a lot of cliches around this, like meeting them where they are and that kind of thing. But it's just unlike any other relationship that you have, they are changing so rapidly that what they were a month ago is not what they are a month later, and you have to change in function of them. And that's why being close to them and having time with them to learn where they are today and what their interests are today has so much value versus saying, when you were 5, you always like to draw. Why don't you like to draw? I don't see you drawing anymore. Because
Yeah.
they go through spurts and changes, and they're not the same person.
Right. Yeah. And even their friends and their activities change. So it's
Yeah,
very dynamic. It's
yeah,
dynamic. You got to read the room, and
yeah,
when life is happening, that's easier said than done. And I don't,
yeah. And they will laugh at you the fact that, like, oh, you don't know I don't like potatoes or something, or
yeah.
you're still living back when I was 12. And they're keyed into that, whether you're watching them, and they get kind of.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point too. And I think for older dads too. So, our situation, right? We have kids, or I assume we have kids who are not living. They're out on their own now, and some parents hang on way too long to authority, and they're telling their adult kids what they should do and what they didn't. I remember my parents or my in-laws said, "Hey, Thanksgiving is, we're meeting this day at this time, and we'll see you there." And my wife and I had this conversation. I said, "Hey, look, we're our own family now, so we just told the in-laws of like, hey, look, you can invite us. We'd love for you to invite us. We'll let you know if we can come or not.
Yeah,
But we're not. You're not telling us where where to be." And so as a parent, so we're doing that with our launch kids now. We're inviting them. We're not telling them what to do. I ask for permission to give my son advice. I don't just give it to him.
yeah.
So yeah,
That's a
so
really good point, because I think a lot of people are like, it's Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving's always at 2 o'clock, and you're going to be there, and then you realize that there's a conflict with the boyfriend or the husband or whatever, and it's not going to work, and you're really hurt or miffed or angry, or don't they appreciate, or all these things that we kind of go through in our reaction stage to the fact that we've lost that family always does everything together kind of thing that's so true for a while. But you have to respect that they now have their own lives, and it's hard letting go.
well, and they now have their own family,
Yeah, new own
right?
families. Yeah, and
Yeah. So again, the dads with young kids, it's like it's your own family. Like I think that's first before it's the grandparent to either in-laws or your own parents. It's like so we did that. I don't know when the kids got like 5 and up. It's like we wouldn't have Christmas at home, right? We wouldn't have our own or holidays at home, and you know we'll decide if we want to come see the parents or
right.
not, or the
Yeah,
grandparents or not. Yeah. So and
yeah,
then the number three, I don't know how you feel about this one, but we try to crack down on phones and phone usage, and
yeah.
we were actually relatively late. Our rule was kids got their phones at 13, and that I think the average age is 7 or 6 now. And the stuff, and intuitively we just knew it was a bad idea, and the studies I think are showing that phones are just wreaking havoc on our kids and
Yeah, 20
generations
years
are.
later, the schools are finally starting to say we've got like no phones in the school. I mean, it's hard to
Yeah.
imagine they waited that long.
Well,
I
states in Australia are saying no to social media not until you're 16, and yeah, so I think we're starting to realize like this is really damaging for our kids, and our kids got around it, and we were a little bit lax with it used to be don't take your phone to the room, so that they don't last very long. So my regret was I wish I would have held to that because I think it's tough because they have the peer pressure of their friends because they have phones, and but man, phones are bad. Social media, it's bad. It's really bad. I
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
opinion.
No, I think the thing in there is that it's really important to, I mean, versus the people who are overly authoritative and don't allow any loss of control, is also remembering at the same time you do have control. If a child at 12 says, I have to have an iPhone, or everybody else
Yeah,
has them, and all the rest of the arguments that they have because they're master negotiators, you still at the end of the day can decide everybody else has other families have their rules and we have ours and you can't have one. Our kids didn't get them until 16. So, uh,
Ah, man.
we had to give them a flip phone earlier because that became
Okay.
kind of necessary for pickups and things like that. Uh, uh, but they didn't get, an iPhone like smart device until they were 16. And now
Well, I
kind of
wish I would have done
replacing.
what you did.
Yeah. Sorry.
Now what?
No, what you were saying, something I did.
Oh yeah, yeah. I said I wish I would have been able to do that. Do the 16. Hold to that. That was
Well,
smart
it
what
was
you did.
very, very hard. Yeah. I mean, just a
Yeah.
lot, there was a lot of pressure and a lot of crying around it. And at one point we realized for our son who's younger that social media had grown so much versus our daughter that he needed to have at least a kind of dumb smartphone so that he could be at a party and still be on social media while at that party. So he had a Wi-Fi only device. So he couldn't be like on his phone 100% of the time unless he was in a place that had Wi-Fi everywhere, and that kind of kept it at bay for a little while. But yeah, it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But I agree with you is in that there it's a very negative impact, and as a parent, you just have to kind of weigh what the value of it has than understanding technology versus how much we now know about how bad they are for developing bad habits.
Yeah, definitely. And I used to laugh at my mom who would say, "Hey, Adam, I did the best I could with the information I had," and I'd say, "Yeah, okay, mom." But now I can look back and go, "Yeah, you know what? So I have some regrets, and my parenting isn't over. I still have one at home, but I do feel like we did the best, and I'd encourage the listeners, like, you know what? I'm sure you're doing the best you can too. Hopefully, there's a takeaway there. But one of the things I would encourage that again the young dads or dads maybe with teenagers is like what we were talking about, just the amount of obligations and responsibility you have. At least in my experience, and I don't know if you experienced this, Paul, but it was more than I realized. I mean, it was sort of the weight of the world was on my shoulders with
Yeah.
being a business owner, husband. I'm still a son,
Yeah.
but having kids and just it is a lot, and I think you're under so much pressure that you don't realize that. Again, when you come out to it, it's almost like the you get a little bit of lift and like just disorienting, and just for dads to be ready for that, like it's just probably going to happen. And I don't know if there's a ton you can do to prepare for it other than to know it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I do advise everybody who listens because most coaches I have on the show have a free half an hour long discovery session and to take advantage of that or take advantage of your company's therapy sessions. I just found out my wife's company gives 8 free therapy sessions, and why
No,
why not? I mean, even if
perfect.
you're not in the
Yeah.
hole, having somebody to talk through and being aware of some of the pressures. I mean, like the scenario you just mentioned, 4 kids, sandwich generation with you taking care of your mom and your job and then your relationship with your spouse. That's a lot of stuff going on. And if you just try to, just power your way through it for 15 years, it's exhausting. And at the end, then you probably never gotten in touch with your purpose and your why. And it's not surprising that you'd have existential questions that, if
Yeah. Yeah. You're exactly right. To that point, like I sold my company, and a lot of people warned me that like, hey, it's going to be rough once you sell it because your identity. And I'm like, okay, I got it. I know that's coming. I wish I should have had a coach during the process before I sold it, as I was selling it, and after I sold it. And so you're exactly right that as a dad, like if you got teenagers right now, maybe get some coaching around what's coming next, around midlife, around purpose, and start being ready. And because you do coaching for dads, right, Paul?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and is that stuff that you covered, that transition of like empty nesting? Is that a topic that comes
Yeah,
up
just one of
or
the many things. I mean, I have my clients range all the way from dads who have really small kids who are like, I want to make sure I do this right. And
Hmm.
I created a course that's all about values orientation is one of the major parts of it, trying to figure out what your family values are, kind of what your family's purpose is. And if you
Yeah.
list 4 or 5 things that are values that are important to you and your partner, and you have a far better chance of making sure that the family exists with those values and that you transmit those values to your kids than if you just hope at the
You
end they turn
you
out to
you
be
wing it. Yeah.
generous, kind, thoughtful, honest people. I mean, if that there's a chance it'll happen, but you have a better chance if you prepare with the end in mind. But then I also have a lot of clients who are men who are struggling with some of these same issues, either life transitions or especially the teen years, which are confusing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are the toughest for us.
yeah,
The terrible twos and threes, for whatever reason, wasn't hard. But man, the teens surprised us.
yeah.
Took us
Well, I
by
think
surprise.
don't you think there are two different types of stress that when they're screaming and yelling, yeah, you got to be patient and kind of go through it when they're with 3 or 5. I'm not talking about the teenagers, but then later on, because they're not they're not evil. They're not usually there's not usually a demon seed in there, or they're not manipulative at that age. They're just little tiny human beings. And then later on with the teenagers, it becomes a lot more of a question of now we have deeper questions of psychology and maturation and hormones and all kinds of other things that make the whole conversation a lot more complicated.
Yeah, no, I mean they're just trying to figure out who they are and what this thing called life is, and it's not always pretty, and so you gotta be patient. There's a lot of laughing at some of the behavior, or I would just at the dinner table, which by the way, the dinner table is the best thing a family can do, in my opinion. Have it, do it often, but just my kids would be in their one of their attitudes, and I would just laugh. I'd be like, just we'll look at back at it like 5 years later, and we will laugh together. But you're being a jerk right now, or
Yeah.
stop being a jerk to your mom. She didn't deserve that, So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, calling them
so
out is it's important too. I mean, because
yeah,
there are behaviors that don't seem that horrible. I mean, hitting your sister versus making fun of your sister, maybe there's a big, huge difference there. But both should be called out.
yeah, and maybe part of our goal was to launch independent kids, like healthy, independent kids who could function as human beings and contribute to society, right? And so, part of what we were getting is they were testing that out in their teen. They're like, okay, well, if you're making me independent and autonomous and stuff, then I'll start
Yeah,
acting on that. We're like, well, wait, not
yeah,
yet. You need to wait till you're 19 or something.
right.
But yeah,
Yeah, great. Well, it's really a pleasure talking to you and sharing ideas. I just love having conversations about how people have done this and thought through it. People can find you at madetomatter.coach, not madetomatter.coach.com, but madetomatter.coach, right? And
yep, that's it.
yeah, and your book is Life That Matters. Do I
Yeah,
have
the
that?
Life That Matters manifesto. It's really there's 11 principles to live a life that matters. Purpose being one of the biggest principles in that. It's half book and half workbook. So it's a very pragmatic book. It's not like oh, this is nice. It's actually there are exercises to put it to use and go through the process.
Yeah, that's great. And you do have a discovery call at madetomatter.coach that people can sign up for you for. I think it's a 30-minute call. But if you're questing right now about some of these issues, or just want to, if friendly ear to talk through something that's going on, I think free discovery calls are the best best thing in the world
Yeah,
for people who need a little bit of somebody to hear them out, because that's kind of rare in our culture. Usually, the people who are hearing you, also want to hear, they want you to hear back. So, a conversation with a friend, you can unload on them for half an hour, but usually then it's tempered with their need to jump in and talk about themselves. And with your spouse, it's also, it's not always the best place to air all your feelings and try to figure out a path forward. And that's what I love about coaching, is that we're also,
yeah,
we're action oriented. We're onto the, like, what are you going to do about this feeling, or you have versus versus therapy, which is not to take anything away from therapy, but it has its place, whereas coaching is a different animal.
It is a different modality, but in my experience, it can be absolutely life changing. And so I'm
Yeah.
taking the discovery call just a little bit further. It's and I'm making a change on my website. I'm sure maybe by the time this is out, that change will happen. But I'm doing a 90-minute coaching experience.
Oh,
So
wow.
I want people to experience, hey, what is coaching really like with you, and
Yeah.
you should see the result.
Yeah.
In that first call, so
Yeah.
like if we're a fit or not. So I'm gonna take a little bit more than 30 minutes, and I'm looking forward to see how that works out.
Yeah. I think that's very, very generous. And I think you can definitely get a lot of value out of even a 30-minute call, but a 90-minute call where you really do a deep dive, you can really get some important next steps. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, thanks a lot for joining me.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Paul. I appreciate it.
Okay. Again, Paul Banis with GreatDad.com. You can find my coaching offerings at GreatDad.com/go, as well as a course on how to develop gratitude, which is a key building block to what we kind of call happiness. And that's free for listeners to the podcast. Okay. Until next time, stay strong.